His name is Geoff Faulkner, and in the 90s, Geoff Faulkner worked under the employ of the Canadian government in 2 enforcement positions. During his night shifts, he had UFO encounters in the Yukon, and that's province in Canada. Having had 2 near-death experiences and extraterrestrial contact, Geoff traveled from Canada to the U.S. and then ended up residing near Mount Shasta, California. This is actually a natural place to gravitate towards if you're maintaining or open to maintaining contact with extraterrestrial beings. To go check it out. But he and others witnessed in Canada on that Yukon highway in 1997 a UFO event. And having been part of an official group of government employees that saw this happen, Geoff felt he had to leave under enormous pressure and never speak about it again. But he's here tonight. And after being pushed underground for a number of years, he now feels he can talk about his experiences openly and with us this evening. Thank you and welcome. Welcome to the show tonight. Geoff, hi.
Thank you. I was just explaining, bear with me tonight because I came down with a terrible head cold yesterday, so I don't always sound like this.
Actually, it sounds very good on you. I like that edge to your voice. You sound pretty nice. It's great to hear from you. Thank you for coming tonight. I also have a slight cold, so I really appreciate you making it as well. So, Geoff, I mean, we're just so excited. You are the person that we are bringing in to tonight's event to induct our UFO Witness event series that I will be starting. And we are all pretty much on our tiptoes waiting to hear parts of your story and, of course, your theories around this. So, Geoff, tell us a bit about yourself, please.
Sure, Carmen. I think you pretty much covered it. I had 2 NDEs growing up, one in England when I was 4 years old. I was impaled on a fence, and that's the first time I saw angels all surrounding me as doctors and nurses. And then I left my body when I was being sewn up at home, actually, in those days. And I lifted out of my body, and I saw these doctors and nurses around me again holding hands that nobody else saw. And I survived that one, and then I grew up seeing spirits, and I would wake up and find them sitting on my bed or standing over looking at me, and I was never afraid of them. And then when I was 18, I joined the Navy in Nova Scotia, actually, and I'm Canadian, guys. And I drowned in a training exercise, and I was underwater for 12 minutes, and I crossed over at that time. That was, I saw a lot of things, I was shown a lot of things, and I made the choice to come back, and I came back with a really, really great understanding. I remembered everything that I saw. Then just to zip forward, I kind of grew up kind of taking life not quite so seriously because I know it's not our true reality. We're here to experience and to exercise our judgments and this sort of thing. I'll tell you right off the bat, there is no wrong decision. There's just easier decisions and harder decisions. We're not judged. We actually judge ourselves. I remember when I went over, I was standing with a being there, and I said, oh, gosh, I should have done this. And they said, no, you could have done that. So there's no judgment coming from them. That's kind of a fallacy from the church. So let's drop that one. Then in 1999, I was sitting on my computer after I left the government job. That's when it really kind of took off after I had the experiences and that sort of thing. And I had an epiphany, which is, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. And I don't belong to any church or institution of belief. And I was sitting on my computer, and this energy came into my feet and rose up through my body. And I couldn't move at all. And then I just felt like I was empty, and then all of a sudden I was just filled with this immense love. It's the only way. You can't describe the intensity of it. This is sometimes why we struggle so hard for love and acceptance on this planet, because we still are trying to identify with the love that we've been separated from by the veil of being here. But we never can ever reach that kind of an understanding of it here. At that time, I was shown. Actually, at that time, Jesus appeared before me in the upper half of his torso, and he smiled and he said, "I've come to awaken you to what you chose to come back and do." And I knew then that was the being that I stood beside when I drowned. He then showed me world events, which at the end of the world events, he had pretty much showed me the worst case scenario of where we could be going, and I'm glad to say it is altering. It's been on the timeline right now, so I'm pleased about that. But he told me when I would speak on it and I would write books, and he said, do not convert, do not convince, light the spark, the work is there. So that's what I do, is I share all the information I get in my life and let people decide what they want to do with it. So anyway, to get back into the, I touch on this briefly because I don't know if you got my message today, Carmen, but for the first time in about 3 years, I had my Facebook hacked yesterday and my Hotmail, and I have no doubt who that is. It's happened before, but not for quite a while. And it's funny, it happened the day before I'm coming on your show. I've been on shows before where sometimes the interviewers have actually had black helicopters go over their own personal homes, and that's gone on for quite some time. Actually, not just a small event. The thing is that the event on the Alaska Highway started. It was a chain that started a chain. It wasn't immense in itself, except for the information I got from it. When it came off the job, that was when it really kind of got strange. I was driving north up to the Yukon, and I had a passenger with me, and I won't say who because I would never do that. But a passenger, and we saw this light following off to the west, and it was along the Yukon mountains, and it was when Hale-Bopp comet was going over. So it was quite a picture with the northern lights and all that sort of thing, and it was so bright and so clear up there in the atmosphere that you could see it quite well. And as we drove north, it followed along, and we stopped and we got out the binoculars, and we could see it very clearly that it was sort of a cigar shape because being a disc, it was sideways to us, but the lights were like red and green and blue and that kind of thing, so clearly that you could see the lights. Sorry. When we came back from the Yukon, I sensed a lot while I was there, but when we came back from the Yukon, here's where it gets a little hairy. A U.S. convoy carrying missiles was going up to Alaska, and it came through my area of enforcement. And I kind of dealt with them, and they had to leave some things behind because of the restrictions on the highways at that time of the year in the spring of '97. They were going up there apparently for war games, which I've researched and found there were no war games that were actually going on at that time. North Korea was acting up at the time, and I believe that's why they were going. But they had these trucks with missiles on them, and they left and they went up. And when they came back, one of the drivers came to me and said, "Well, you should have seen that." And I said, "What?" And he said, "Well, I saw this. We saw this UFO, and it was following our convoy. It was like red, green, blue lights, and it was going around like this, and it followed us, and it was really something." And there were some MPs nearby, and kind of frowning at him, and he told me afterwards that he was told not to divulge anything at all about what was seen on that military convoy. Now he went up on the second load. When he came back, and I should say this is the same location that I had seen it the week before. When he came back, I kind of said to him quietly, I said, "So any more activity?" And he said, "I can't even talk to you." So I've been told that if I divulge anything of what happened on that second trip, he said that I would disappear. So we knew there was a lot of things going on up there. I personally, I don't have evidence of it, but I personally believe that there's probably some kind of contact up there. And I'll explain why as we go along. I left the job because it just became too stressful. And 2 years later, I was renting a beautiful home with a friend, and we had to do a credit check. They had to do one on us, and they came back and said, there's a problem with your credit. And I said, why? And I was 52 years old. They said, you don't have any. I said, what do you mean? They said, the credit bureau told me to ask you if you are with the CIA or a CSIS, which we all know is an arm of the CIA, and if you're a member of either of those or involved with them, and if you don't want to answer, then we won't force you. But apparently the CIA or CSIS are the only agencies, the credit bureau said, that had the ability to wipe out a person's entire life credit history. So anyway, so I wanted to rent the house. I said, well, I can't answer that. But things have been going on like that. I had an incident where I was having coffee in Victoria, BC, one summer every morning with a fellow. I won't say his name, but he told me he was white haired and very officious looking, and he said he was involved in Burbank, California, in the movies and all this. And we were talking all summer. And then one morning, towards the end of that summer, I was taken off from my lectures, and the coffee was really bitter. And I said, "Well, that's really bitter coffee." And he said, "Yeah, it's the last pot." And I know Starbucks don't keep it that long. And I was leaving there, and I was taking it easy. I was on my 10-speed. And anyway, I wiped out, and I hurt my knee, and I was walking up to the ambulance depot, which was right there, luckily. And the fellow said, "Would you like me to fix that?" And I said, "Sure." And I walked towards him, and that's the last I remembered. Now, 2 days later, 48 hours later, I woke up in the local hospital on the island, and they said that you've had some kind of an amnesia incident here, and it's what we called 48-hour. Look this up on the internet. The 48-hour global transient amnesia. So they said, we found in your backpack, your daughters, and they're going to come and talk to you. And here's a pen and paper, and if you think of anything that you can remember from the last 48 hours, which I thought later, why 48 hours? I'd want to remember everything. They write it down and give it to us and don't show it to anybody. So I had to also state at this time is that when I came out of that and the nurse came to me, I looked around the hospital room. I had no conscious thought. This is the big thing. I had no conscious thought. I looked at a window and it didn't register a window. I didn't relate the name door to that object. It's like as if my thoughts had been wiped. I mean, totally clean. And these over the next 48 hours is when they slowly come back. Now, I'm going to tell you, when you look it up on the internet, you're going to find that they say global transient amnesia isn't really understood. Medicine doesn't know what causes it, but all of your memory comes back within the next 48 hours. That's the name. But the people involved that have it don't remember that 48 hours. Well, I'm telling you guys, when you know stuff, they want to get rid of that stuff, but it didn't quite work with me. I have no idea. I mean, at the time I had no idea, but I have no doubts that I was drugged that time, and I don't know what happened to that 48 hours. But I'll tell you this, is that we moved down here to the States, my wife and I, she's American. We moved down here, and we were moving our stock down, and it took 4 trips. Every time we came through the border, they would come up and say, "Come and see your passport," and the guy would walk off and run it on the computer. And one of the trips, one of the early trips, a guy came back with it, and I said, joking with him, I said, because I'd been in enforcement, so I knew that it would pass through. And I said, did that check out okay? I said, "I'm not wanted." And he said, and he came up quietly to me. He said, that checked out absolutely fine. He said, and I really want to apologize for drawing attention to you. I'd love to see what's on that computer because I've never been bothered at the border. One fellow gave us a hard time on the second trip. I mean, an ex-Marine with a bad attitude, and the supervisor came out, ordered him back inside, and told us to go on our way. On the next trip, I asked the guy, "Is that guy still here?" And they said, "No, he was shipped out, immediately." So I think that reflects a little bit on the 48 hours I had missing because I've never had that at the border. But I'll let you talk for a minute, Carmen, because my story goes on forever.
No, I'm just interested to hear your events. For one, it sounds traumatizing, utterly traumatizing, what you've been through. I do think, thank God that was 1997. I can't imagine you being in that position of responsibility and then having no training to maybe help you with the effects of not being able to talk about such events. And I am fascinated to hear, unfortunately, I'm very distraught to hear that something was introduced into your system where you felt you were poisoned. I have heard stories like that, and I do know that exists. Also, your history, interestingly enough, I do believe in 1997 there weren't really perhaps that many, quote-unquote hackers around. So maybe some of your theory or story is true, though if I could be conspiratorial and say, but maybe another government wiped and erased your files. you know? So interesting and intriguing, and my mind spins and I think, really, that sounds like too neat of a job. And so now this man, are you in touch with any of the surviving witnesses?
Pardon me?
Are you in touch with any of the surviving witnesses of this event, like any of your work friends or anybody like that?
Well, that's another thing is that I also, when I left the job, I actually applied for another enforcement job. And here's the real clincher is that when they went for a reference for me from the BC government, they were told, and I followed it up, and I was told there's absolutely no record anywhere in their files of me ever working for them. But they'll hate to hear this, and I do have all of my training certificates locked away in a very good place. So, as for the incident on the Yukon highway, they were truck drivers going through, and that's all I knew about them. Not much was said about that, and it was hushed up pretty quietly. As far as my credit record being wiped out, my girlfriend at the time is a very good witness of that because she and I were renting the house. So we both experienced that situation, and my passenger in the vehicle that night that we saw the UFO, of course, you know. So I do have the contacts, but I know it's all interesting and intriguing to people, but you know what I'd really like to kind of touch on a little bit here is that we have to get off this disclosure thing. The government loves this. They have us biting the bit. When are we going to have disclosure? Is it this year? Is it next year? My kids waiting for that candy bar to arrive. You know what? There's so many people that have had experiences like mine, and even more so, shattering their mind, that we all really, we have no doubts. We know that ET is there. As I said, my wife and I witnessed one coming over our ranch in the valley here in 2009, which we again saw on YouTube over Chile. That came over at 11 o'clock at night on a moonlit evening, at about 15 to 17,000 feet up, and it was elongated triangular. It was the size of 3 football fields long. It was going fast because it cleared the valley in 7 seconds, but it was so big, it looked like it was actually going in slow motion. No sound, no lights, nothing. Now, this is like Independence Day size. This went right across. Everybody at 11 o'clock at night in the ranching valley were all getting all in bed or catching the news. And so, I mean, what I really want to get out there tonight is that this isn't a theory anymore. This is the reality, and I'll pop this in real quick, because I did a little background in here to give you some factual stuff here, too. Paul Hhel, and I'm sure you're aware of him, the former Defense Minister of Canada in, I believe, 1969. I just got this off the net, and it's actually been authenticated. He says, and I'm just quoting a few things here, alien species have been visiting Earth for thousands of years, says Canada's former defense minister, and they worried that humans are going to destroy the planet. He's the first top official from a G8 nation to claim that extraterrestrial life has been confirmed, and he discussed his beliefs on Russia Today. Hhel said that up to 80, that's 80, different species regularly visit Earth, from short grays to Nordic blondes and tall whites who could almost pass as humans. He claimed the tall whites are working with the U.S. Air Force in Nevada. They come from all over the galaxy, including from Venus, Mars, and Saturn's moon, Andromeda, and other star systems, Hhel said. He said all but perhaps 1 or 2 of the species were benevolent and wanted to help humans, but they're bound by a code of conduct. Just flipping here. This is really important to get this out, especially to the Canadians that are listening. He said military investigators have traced 4 of the species back to thousands of years ago on the planet. We have a long history of UFOs, and of course there has been a lot more activity in the last few decades since we invented the atomic bomb, and they are very concerned about that and the fact that we might use them again, because the cosmos is in unity, and it affects not just us, but other people in the cosmos, Hhel said. They are very much afraid that we might be silly enough to start using atomic weapons again. This would be very bad for us and for them as well. He said the aliens had accepted that humans had a right to run their own planet, although there were concerns about the stewardship and the atomic weapons, which have such a devastating effect on our Earth. He said the aliens wish they could share more technology with humans, but are afraid that it would be used for warfare, and a lot more too, especially in the fields of medicine and agriculture, if we would go about it peacefully. But some of our people in government are more interested in taking technology from them and turning it into weapons. Anyway, it kind of goes on, but it's this is now he is excuse me. This is the guy who used to be the head of all the military in Canada in the 60s when all of this was going on.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot out there, and for the people that are kind of religiously based, I pulled a little thing up on Billy Graham, because I used to love Billy Graham, the evangelist. And Billy Graham, who's passed away now, he said, in his book, he said, I believe there is intelligent life in outer space, and these beings probably look like us. A solar system is just one of billions in God's colossal creation, and I find it very hard to believe he would have created only one living planet, Earth. I firmly believe there is intelligent life in outer space, beings who probably look very much like the average American. He also believes that they have the capacity and the capability to visit Earth. They worship God just as we do. They could hold the solution to many of Earth's problems. Let's see. I've discovered that many of America's top scientists. Now, this is a man, not just an evangelist, but he was also on the right-hand ear of just about every president there was. Mm-hmm. That many of America's top scientists and astronauts who are actively investigating the question of extraterrestrial life share my view. There are intelligent beings like us far away in space who worship God, but would have nothing to fear. We would have nothing to fear from meeting these people. Anyway, he goes on and on. It's what I'm saying is this is we have to get past, I guess, what I kind of call the silly and the dramatic stage. It's about going just strictly to the drama and just start to realize we don't need disclosure now. We need intervention. This is where we're at now. The governments will not give us intervention or will not allow it, because if they just close to us, what are we going to choose? The government's got nothing to choose from. So the thing is that this is why I've had contact. I've had contact for 10 years. We haven't had physical yet, but I've been informed that it's very, very soon. We've had evidence of the stuff that we get, things that can be confirmed. The announcements to be made by NASA that are then a week later made by NASA. So, that one that came over the valley that night, Carmen, they came through to me the next night. In my sleep, my wife, we have books and books of writings on it, and my wife asked about the ship that went over that we saw. It was amazing. And he said, it's a Palladian scientific vessel. And she said, what do you do here with it? And they said, well, we go to the major Richter scale quake sites, and you'll see us, we're seen there, we center over the epicenter, and we harmonize the crust with sonics to cut down the damage. They basically hold the plant together in a lot of ways right now. Now, 4 months later, I found that ship on YouTube hovering over Santiago, Chile, at night, but with the lights on, flashing away for over 40 minutes. I went to USGS, the Geological Survey down here, and I looked in there. That was the day that they had an 8.2 confirmation.
I'm looking at that right now. I remember seeing that with some amazing footage, and I've seen some pretty interesting footage out there, and I've been, having a bit of fun trying to see which ones are, misinformation, and also as a psychic, I'm able to kind of sense which ones are and which aren't. And just a little bit of background for you, and also for you listeners out there. Why I've decided to go with UFO intervention is because for myself, I grew up in Africa, never had much of the UFO U.S. culture around me, and thought that it was utter rubbish, and thought it was probably just devised by, Hollywood to bring in some more interesting stories. But I'd actually had forgotten about experiences that some of us had as children. But nonetheless, what was more interesting for me was that I had dreams of certain crafts or technology, as I have dreams of politics, science, and oncoming events. And because I've written over 500 of these dreams down and documented them over the last 3 years, and have unfortunately had to dream about a lot of really awful things, such as the Fukushima incident, which I knew about 5 months prior. And if you Google my real name, you'll actually see an image that I drew, an art piece that I drew prior to the incident. And so I'm highly psychic that way, and it's very traumatizing to be that way. But I also noted that some of the descriptions you have of these crafts are like my dreams. And I just can't help but say that, for me, because I'm somewhat of an spiritual skeptic, I find that very interesting, because what you describe is pretty much what I have seen in another manner. So I haven't actually physically seen any. Now, you were discussing all kinds of interesting things. I mean, for me to think about the commingling of 80 different races, we only deal with 3 or 4 here on Earth, but I mean, we're talking about completely different DNA. And how do you feel they deal with each other coming into our territory? Do they cooperate?
Well, that's no problem. This is the whole thing. We're behind the evolution ladder. We're on the lower rungs on this planet. The thing is that they've been doing this as Mr. Hhel said. Some have been coming here for thousands of years. I mean, since man has been on this planet. This is nothing new. There's like one more thing that I just noticed here, and I meant to say, is that Billy Graham, one thing he said was, from my studies of the scriptures, I can find nothing that would change our faith in God and the gospel if we discover life on other planets. And our society would benefit greatly by the discovery. We would have everything to gain. These are people, these are a species that basically are creators. They all have a creator or a God. They all have that supreme being that they aspire to. And this has come from these officials that are coming out now. That's what I'm basing it on. The ones that come through us, it's the same thing. They're so far advanced that their part of evolution is for down here experiencing it, that they've already surpassed all that. When you have 80 species, as Mr. Hhel witnessed, and says there's only 2 that are benevolent, then that pretty much gives you an idea. There's already a harmony in the universes, in the galaxies. We're supposed to be evolving from where we are into where they are. Now, the important thing is that I learned when I had my NDE, Carmen, was that we are totally evolved beings on the other side, but we have that block by us when we come here, because it's not just a matter of trying to learn something we already know. It's coming down here and having the fortitude with all the temptation, all the things we shouldn't do, and making all the decisions ourselves without any spiritual guidance from up above, except for what we can pull out of the center of our real selves. Is that we're showing here that we're at a point of control, that we can start to make those kind of changes. And this is, I had this the other night at 2:00 in the morning. My wife came out, and I was sitting here, and I was automatic writing, I guess, channeling, as I do with them sometimes. And I didn't even know she was there until she said the next day. I didn't know I'd written anything until the next day in the afternoon. This is obviously for this show. It says the world is compressing because the people are awakening. When this happens, the world the world expands with such extremity that it falls back upon itself as the new paradigm. The social consciousness cannot ever be again as it was, nor can it ever stay as it is. Nothing can stand in the way of the evolution of a human soul, for it never was unevolved. There's a clue right there. My understanding on the other side, we are evolved, but we have never been unevolved here, but we are blocked from our evolution, so we work through all the stuff to show that we can come back to core. It says we never were unevolved, only adrift in a world of disinformation, which we're flooded by it. Forward it moves until once again reuniting with the core of the common God consciousness home. Now that came through the other night. I mean, I'm not a silly kind of man, but I'll tell you, I can't sit down and write that.
No, I know.
That answers the question. That answers your question right there. Is that
I'm just going to interrupt you
sorry.
quickly for our commercial, and I want to actually touch on what you were saying regarding this kind of theory and spiritual phenomenology. And one moment.
A new era in psychic services has begun. PsychicAccess.com. You can connect with our psychic advisors by telephone or chat 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. All of our psychic advisors are interviewed, fully verified, and accuracy tested, assuring you quality service. We're living in some very troubled times right now. More and more, the world's problems are affecting us on a personal level. You don't have to deal with this alone. Our highly accurate psychics, caring advisors, and talented mediums can help with situations you are currently experiencing and can let you know what the future may hold for you. All new customers get a free 6-minute reading. All you have to do is register. Why not visit us now and get a free reading at PsychicAccess.com.
So, Geoff, with this philosophy and guidance, what do you think it would take for these persons, individuals, we call them aliens, to get through to us? We've had 4,000 years of education in terms of from world religions. What would a foreign intervention actually achieve?
Well, that's opening a can of worms. I try and tell people, because of the religious aspect that everybody lives under here, is that we have to stop thinking about ourselves as earthlings, and we are actually extraterrestrial. We believe that the body is of the planet, which it is, so that's terrestrial, and our spirit comes from heaven, from home out in the galaxy, the cosmos, and takes possession of the body and fulfills its purpose here and returns back there at the time of the death of the body. Then our soul is also extraterrestrial. And that means that God and Jesus are extraterrestrial. So I'm kind of getting this extraterrestrial thing into who we are and who they are. We're all the same. All of our brothers and sisters in the cosmos are all children of God, and we all go back to the source. What do you call it, the Creator? By the way, I asked one of my contacts here when they came through one night about God. Is that God's name? How do we get God for the name? Well, God is this untangible, except for what we understand of. So, like, he kind of, the Bible puts down that Jesus came down in form so that we can relate. Okay, we can't see God, but here's the Son of God, and therefore we can relate to that, take the learning off him, and now we're connected to God through. And that's why Jesus said, no one shall reach my Father but through me. So they're getting that channel going there. I was told that God isn't actually his name. God stands for geometry of design. So you would think that the greatest creator out there in the cosmos that creates every tiny little grain of sand and every massive planet is one massive creator. Well, this is a geometry of design, and it's more like that's his job description or his professional line instead of his actual name. Don't forget that a lot of things that we use for names are in this realm. When I went over totally without a body, and I was totally conscious energy. I was conscious thought. That everything intelligently working in the way of hearing my thoughts like words and being somewhere but not seeing my body. We are intelligence. I guess if I had to put some kind of a body to it, I would think like kind of like a plasma being, semi-transparent, because I didn't see it with the body as such. So the thing is that when we talk, they talk in the Bible about the battle of the angels, the war of the angels, when Satan, who was an angel, actually went against God and was cast out because he failed. Now we actually take that out of the mythical side of what Church wants you to believe, because they don't want you to know that you're extraterrestrial. I mean, good Lord. We'd have to think that we're something more than we are. So they keep us in this form of ignorance. And it's not so much lies, but lies by omission, like little things like God has many mansions. Well, God has many universes, many galaxies. They change things. And the fact about about that hell and the devil and Satan all live in the center of the earth. We're brought out. Hell is under the earth. Well, in reality, that's where they say that the grays are in the center of the earth. Not the center, but they're in the crust. Admiral Byrd, who went to the expedition to the South Pole, when he came back, this very credible man, had a book that he wrote on it where he actually mentions the cities within the Earth's crust. He actually says in his book he was taken into the Earth's crust, into these major cities that are below the crust down there. I mean, if you're going to do something like that, you're going to put it where nobody goes. That's the South Pole, or places in the Bermuda Triangle, or actually it's a magnetic point of navigational. That's why everything does go wacky in there. So when you say what's it going to take, it's going to take them coming down basically right in front of us, and they're going to shatter our misbeliefs or misinterpretations. And when it's in front of us, that's when it's going to work. Because then we're going to find out we are these wonderful spiritual beings, and that we can evolve a lot better when we're not being drugged by GMO foods, we're not being poisoned, we're not, constantly the planet's falling apart, and it's not going to support life much longer. So it's going to take that kind of a big thing. And like if you get to the point, my understanding is that we are extraterrestrial, then Jesus is extraterrestrial. So I don't question the second coming of Christ, but don't be surprised if it's a fleet of UFOs that fill the eastern sky and not angels with wings. Angels with wings were created by artists. The angels were never seen to have wings in the early records of angelic encounters and things like this. This is something that they did. So we're still talking about beings without wings, and I believe it's going to take. I believe that the second coming of Christ is actually going to be the return of Jesus and the angels, which are other terrestrials, our brothers and sisters. They're going to come down for this intervention. Billy Graham also stated in one part of his book that he believes that UFOs contain angels of God who will start to show up in great numbers prior to the second coming of Christ. So here's where we are, folks. It's coming whether you like it or not. But, and I got to say this one, because this is the clincher. This is what we have to really think about now. Martin Luther King said, our generation will have to repent not only for the words and acts of the children of darkness, but also for the fears and apathy of the children of light. So when you have children of light, those that are here for good, and there's a lot of us, when the children of light stop and are able to face their fears and actually take a firm position in everything that's happening, then things are going to change. There's so much apathy in the world, and the fear comes to them because of the lack of connection to who we are and where we're from.
I wonder why they took an interest in us. I mean, one of the things I wanted to think is I would surmise maybe they can hear us, in pain and wanting to leave and needing some intervention. And another thing I wanted to say, what did that UFO sound like when it passed over you?
The one that came over the ranch? Absolutely.
No, the first one
silent.
in 1997.
Not that sound. Here is something that is 3 football fields long, folks. It had no operational lights, and of course it had to come right over Mount Shasta to come past us in our valley. It had no lights, and the amazing thing was, Carmen, that there was not a sound, not as silently drifted across the valley, not a whir, not a buzz, nothing.
That's the cylindrical one. And then you have that one that came over your area where you live, Mount Shasta. Must be a wonderful community, by the way. And what sound did that have? Can you hear them?
No. If you are hearing sound, you can bet it's some kind of a government sort of replication. These don't work on the same propulsion as what we have here. Everything here that we make operates from the core fossil fuel. Fossil fuel is dinosaur in more ways than one. we don't need to have fossil fuels, and they know that. It's like, I mean, I'm old enough. I'm 65 now. I can remember back when all the V8s, it was coming out about, oh, there's this great device that you can hook onto your carburetor, and your V8 engine won't get 18 miles to gallon, it'll get 25. And then we find out later it really existed, but the auto companies were buying up the patents and killing them because they were also hand in hand with the with the fossil fuel folks. You got guys like Bush and all these guys. I mean, these guys are all up. That's what they do. They make money on fossil fuels. They kill for fossil fuel. In fact, there's a thing I just breezed through to see if I can spot it. But Hhel actually spoke at the University of Toronto back in his day, 2005, I think it was. And here it is, November 2005. Mr. Hhel accused U.S. President George W. Bush publicly of plotting an intergalactic war. The former defense minister told an audience at the University of Toronto, the United States military are preparing weapons which could be used against the aliens, and they could get us into an intergalactic war without us even having any warning. The Bush administration has finally agreed to let the military build a forward base on the moon, which will put them in a better position to keep track of the goings and comings of the visitors from space and to shoot at them if they so decide to. This is the Star Wars technology. So,
that's so like,
you can see why they don't want to share.
No, it's just so like old style, like kind of like a Cold War mentality of like, let's make a base and let's watch the galaxy, and it's like so small-minded because in fact there may not actually be a threat. So what's going on here is really pretty much just kind of the sense of, let's watch the watchers, which I find, of course, is very human. I mean, they must look at us and think we're very peculiar in our ways of feeling so threatened.
Well, the reason that the governments are doing all this, I mean, let's get down to it, is that you can go back all the names, the Illuminati, the powers that be, all of these, the royal families, all these kind of things, the Bush the syndrome, all this kind of stuff throughout history, even the Egyptians. You look back at Akhenaten in Egypt in his day, they have his skull, and this skull is elongated. It's not even human, and that's historically a fact. Now, as Mr. Hhel said, they've been coming here for thousands of years. So, if the ones that were coming in the first place were not that good, weren't as friendly as a lot of them are now, they were the first ones here, is they basically operated everything that they needed to do on this planet through their hierarchy on the planet. So basically, the royal family have always been connected to it since the beginning of time. The Egyptians were connected to it. There's absolutely, as we get older, we know that they did put logs down in sand and put huge, great big laser blocks of stone on it and drag it up onto a pyramid. I mean, you can figure that out in your own backyard. But these were actually built by the extraterrestrials of the time, and it wasn't so much that they were like great transponders and things like this. It was their way of epitomizing the deity of the people that worked for them, that controlled us. It was like, here's a beautiful place for you to be, where they will still worship you. They don't see us, and everything's good. So the reason that we don't have disclosure, folks, is because the governments of the world that are operated by the shadow governments, which is the Illuminati, the powers that be, all these guys, is that we're still enslaved. We're still enslaved. What happens when we start to get a little bit too much awake? Then they start to slap us down, and that's what happens. The people have been murdered. The people have been, there's one fellow, his name doesn't come right now, and I'm sad to say, but he's on YouTube, and he actually, he was at the Dulce thing in New Mexico, where the graves are supposed to be underground there, and they were doing probes in the area, drilling down and putting down not optical cables with cameras on them into these caverns that they were discovering, and one of them came up with the camera cut off. So they found a way to get into that area, and he admitted that, and actually testified to it, that they encountered Greys, and that there was a firefight, and there were Marines there, and actually he shot 3 Greys, he said, and he lost a hand from a laser hit, and he had that stump actually, looked at, and they said it was not just cut off or lost, it was actually very clean, like a laser cut. Now, he was in Black Ops at the time. Now, he got out and he was lecturing on this. Well, I think it was either Portland or Seattle. They found his body. He'd been tortured, he'd been strangled. Terrible, terrible end. And he's no longer speaking about it. But what's interesting is that his father was one of the Nazis that came out of Germany that were brought over by the American government. Because, believe it or not, you can bet that the dark side of the alien aspect were probably in touch with Hitler at the time. If you remember, Germany had just put together the first jet engine, and their first jet plane was coming out just as the war ended. Now, where did they get that technology? So, they're still trying to stifle us, and they're running out of time. All these cities that we hear about them building, and these tunnels underneath the ground, it's not because all these horrible aliens are going to come and wipe us all out, like they're saying, Dan and Afghan and all this stuff. What they're doing is that they're getting somewhere for them to go when the second coming and the extraterrestrial intervention happens. They got to hit ground level and get back underground like they're actually living now. So there's nothing to fear from that. But there's nothing to fear from any of this. I don't fear, but I feel more caution with the government that's supposed to be here protecting me and guiding me than I do from any extraterrestrial I've experienced. And I'll tell you right now is that I'm calling for intervention. And everybody needs to start
prefer? Which ones would you
consciously
prefer?
asking for intervention, because the governments are not representing us.
Which ones would you prefer? What are the Greys like? Why are they so popular? And are they just thrown out there as a lure because they look different?
No, the Greys, Carmen, are the ones that were, but with the government permission, the Greys were actually the ones that were doing all the hybrid cloning, all the animal mutilations, things like this. And actually, a few years ago, there was an agreement that was going to be very limited now. And at that point, the mutilations actually have declined a lot. I won't say who, but I see things around me, and I know a lady who's always had an X on her wrist, a very fine scar, and it's about 2 inches long. And she was visiting her mother one day, and her mother looked at her and said, "Where did you get that scar from?" She said, "Oh, I've always had it." She said, "Why?" And she put her hand for it, and she said, "I've got exactly the same one in the same place." So there's a lot that has been going on. The cloning, the government sold us out so many ways, but they always have since the beginning of eons. The church is involved just as badly. When the government controlled us, the church did. They've been hand in hand forever. But what I'm saying is now it's the time, and they're running out of time. That's why they're building all these underground places, like under Denver Airport in Colorado. I mean, everybody knows that facility is down there. And all these sounds that we hear in different parts of the world, like the droning, and they're saying, "What's that droning in the air?" Well, a lot of that is from the boring under the crust of the earth, and they're boring tunnels everywhere, and they can actually move at lightning speed underground.
And the sinkholes, you think about these things, and oh my goodness, we have 2 minutes left in this interview. It always comes to the end so quickly, and I only feel like we've touched on a small portion of this because we were going to discuss ET language, and also I wanted to but you've really pretty much touched on everything. And so what I wanted to give our audience was an idea as well as to how to contact you, because Geoff, you're going to be launching. He's going to be traveling. I'm going to be meeting him when he comes out to Canada, and he's going to be doing UFO tours, and I'm going to be networking with some of his buddies. And what we're going to be, I would just like to say you can contact him on Facebook. Geoff, his name is Geoff Faulkner. Geoff with a G-E-O-F-F, Faulkner, as in Falcon, but F-A. Ulkner. And Geoff, is there anything you want to tell your potential readers? Because you will put that book together, and if not, I will make sure that someone is going to write a really good screenplay about your story.
Well, I'll tell you, that's my dream, actually, Carmen, because that's the only way I can get it out there to the people that need to know it. And I'll tell you this, it's not boring, but I'll tell you this also, by the time someone has seen that, they'll never be the same again. And I'm hoping something like that will happen in the near future for me, because time is running out. But the thing is that it's going to take that to wake people up. It really is. We did touch on it, but from beginning of time, my time here is I've been a psychic. I started there. I've evolved up, I guess. I've been taken to where God wanted me to be, basically. But I do readings out here in California. I don't do as many as I used to, mostly for local people. But if anybody's interested in having a reading, and I say limited amounts that I do, but they can contact me at Hhler, HEALER _CA48 @hotmail.com. Or they can also approach me on Facebook. But as I say, I'm just filling in a few gaps. I don't do very many, so if anybody's interested, that'd be fine. I can do it by phone, or I can do it by email.
I might contact you for into that, Geoff. And his address again is Hhler _48 @hotmail.com.
Hhler _CA48.
Okay. And
Hhler,
so I
Hhler _CA for Canada, and 48 hotmail.com.
Great. I'm just so pleased you could make it. I'm so sorry you're not well. So intrigued about this. Wish we had a 2-hour event, and we kind of do, but we're going to be taking calls in the second half of the show, which is after the interview. And I just want to bless you for coming on. You are a brave man. Thank God 1997 was 20 years ago. And I really also expect better diplomacy. And if we have a leader, I hope that they know what they're doing. And I wish you the very, very best. Thank you so much, Geoff.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure being on your show.
Oh, fabulous. We'll stay in touch. Have a good night.
Thank you. Good night, all.
Night.
Hello, my name is Res Miranda. If you're having relationship, career, or life issues, I'm inviting you to experience what it's like to have access to professional, highly accurate psychics and spiritual advisors you can trust to care and help you. Register now to get your free 6-minute reading by telephone or chat. Get answers, get access, psychic access, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. PsychicAccess.com.
His name is Geoff Faulkner, and in the 90s, Geoff Faulkner worked under the employ of the Canadian government in 2 enforcement positions. During his night shifts, he had UFO encounters in the Yukon, and that's province in Canada. Having had 2 near-death experiences and extraterrestrial contact, Geoff traveled from Canada to the U.S. and then ended up residing near Mount Shasta, California. This is actually a natural place to gravitate towards if you're maintaining or open to maintaining contact with extraterrestrial beings. To go check it out. But he and others witnessed in Canada on that Yukon highway in 1997 a UFO event. And having been part of an official group of government employees that saw this happen, Geoff felt he had to leave under enormous pressure and never speak about it again. But he's here tonight. And after being pushed underground for a number of years, he now feels he can talk about his experiences openly and with us this evening. Thank you and welcome. Welcome to the show tonight, Geoff. Hi.
Thank you. I was just explaining, bear with me tonight because I came down with a terrible head cold yesterday, so I don't always sound like this.
Actually, it sounds very good on you. I like that edge to your voice. You sound pretty nice. It's great to hear from you. Thank you for coming tonight. I also have a slight cold, so I really appreciate you making it as well. So, Geoff, I mean, we're just so excited. You are the person that we are bringing in to tonight's event to induct our UFO Witness event series that I will be starting. And we are all pretty much on our tiptoes waiting.
On the highways at that time of the year in the spring of 97. They were going up there apparently for war games, which I've researched and found there were no war games that were actually going on at that time. North Korea was acting up at the time, and I believe that's why they were going. But they had these trucks with missiles on them, and they left and they went up. And when they came back, one of the drivers came to me and said, "Well, you should have seen that." And I said, "What?" He said, "Well, I saw this. We saw this UFO, and it was following our convoy. It was like red, green, blue lights, and it was going around like this, and it followed us, and it was really something." And there were some MPs nearby, and kind of frowning at him, and he told me afterwards that he was told not to divulge anything at all about what was seen on that military convoy. Now he went up on the second load. When he came back, and I should say this is the same location that I had seen it the week before. When he came back, I kind of said to him quietly, I said, "So any more activity?" And he said, "I can't even talk to you. I've been told that if I divulge anything of what happened on that second trip," he said, "that I would disappear." So we knew there was a lot of things going on up there. I personally, I don't have evidence of it, but I personally believe that there's probably some kind of contact up there. And I'll explain why as we go along. I left the job because it just became too stressful. And 2 years later, I was renting a beautiful home with a friend, and we had to do a credit check. They had to do one on us, and they came back and said, "There's a problem with your credit." And I said, "Why?" And I was 52 years old. They said, "You don't have any." I said, "What do you mean?" They said, "The credit bureau told me to ask you if you are with the CIA or CSIS, which well knows that."
To hear parts of your story, and of course your theories around this. So Geoff, tell us a bit about yourself, please.
Sure, Carmen. I think you pretty much covered it. I had two NDEs growing up, one in England when I was 4 years old. I was impaled on a fence, and that's the first time I saw angels all surrounding me as doctors and nurses. And then I left my body when I was being sewn up at home, actually, in those days. And I lifted out of my body, and I saw these doctors and nurses around me again holding hands that nobody else saw. And I survived that one, and then I grew up seeing spirits, and I would wake up and find them sitting on my bed or standing over looking at me, and I was never afraid of them. And then when I was 18, I joined the Navy in Nova Scotia, actually, and I'm Canadian, guys. And I drowned in a training exercise, and I was underwater for 12 minutes, and I crossed over at that time. That was, I saw a lot of things, I was shown a lot of things, and I made the choice to come back, and I came back with a really, really great understanding. I remembered everything that I saw. Then just zip forward, I kind of grew up kind of taking life not quite so seriously, because I know it's not our true reality. We're here to experience and to exercise our judgments and this sort of thing. I'll tell you right off the bat, there is no wrong decision. There's just easier decisions and harder decisions. We're not judged. We actually judge ourselves. I remember when I went over, I was standing with a being there, and I said, "Oh, gosh, I should have done this." And they said, "No, you could have done that." So there's no judgment coming from them. That's kind of a fallacy from the church. So let's drop that one. Then in 1999, I was sitting on my computer after I left the government job. That's when it really kind of took off, after I had the experiences and that sort of thing. And I had an epiphany, which is, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. And I don't belong to any church or institution of belief. And I was sitting at my computer, and this energy came into my feet and rose up through my body, and I couldn't move at all. And then I just felt like it was empty, and then all of a sudden I was just filled with this immense love. It's the only way. You can't describe the intensity of it. This is sometimes why we struggle so hard for love and acceptance on this planet, because we still are trying to identify with the love that we've been separated from by the veil of being here, but we never can ever reach that kind of an understanding of it here. At that time I was shown, actually at that time Jesus appeared before me in the upper half of his torso, and he smiled and he said, "I've come to awaken you to what you chose to come back and do." And I knew then that was the being that I stood beside when I drowned. he then showed me world events, which at the end of the world events, he had pretty much showed me the worst case scenario of where we could be going, and I'm glad to say it is altering. It's been on the timeline right now, so I'm pleased about that. But he told me when I would speak on it and I would write books, and he said, do not convert, do not convince, light the spark, the work is there. So that's what I do, is I share all the information I get in my life and let people decide what they want to do with it. So anyway, to get back into the, I touch on this briefly because I don't know if you got my message today, Carmen, but for the first time in about 3 years, I had my Facebook hacked yesterday and my Hotmail, and I have no doubt who that is. It's happened before, but not for quite a while. And it's funny, it happened the day before I'm coming on your show. I've been on shows before where sometimes the interviewers have actually had black helicopters go over their own personal homes, and that's gone on for quite some time. Actually, not just a small event. The thing is that the event on the Alaska Highway started. It was a chain that started a chain. It wasn't immense in itself, except for the information I got from it. When it came off the job, that was when it really kind of got strange. I was driving north up to the Yukon, and I had a passenger with me, and I won't say who because I would never do that. But a passenger, and we saw this light following off to the west, and it was along the Yukon mountains, and it was when Hhel comet was going over. So it was quite a picture with the northern lights and all that sort of thing, and it was so bright and so clear up there in the atmosphere that you could see it quite well. And as we drove north, it followed along, and we stopped and we got out the binoculars, and we could see it very clearly that it was sort of a cigar shape because being a disc, it was sideways to us, but the lights were like red and green and blue and that kind of thing, so clearly that you could see the lights. Sorry. When we came back from the Yukon, I sensed a lot while I was there, but when we came back from the Yukon, here's where it gets a little hairy. A U.S. convoy carrying missiles was going up to Alaska, and it came through my area of enforcement. And I kind of dealt with them, and they had to leave some things behind because of the restrictions